Right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'll welcome you to the Ordinary Council meeting of today's date, 29th of June. I apologise for those online that were expecting to hear this live, but we've had a technical issue today, so it will be recorded and available later. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. As I said, we have had the council prayer this morning, another standing committee. We have nobody absent, so no apologies. And we have no public forum, but we have Mr. Scott Parks zooming in relation to a Hunterville community request for funding at, I think, 1:30, and I'll try and take that when we there are some changes in the order of business, and there are some late items. 10.4, the additional matters for deliberation of the annual plan that weren't dealt with on the council meeting earlier and can't be delayed. So I'm accepting that as a late item. There's also the late item 10.5, Santoff Domain, site for the proposed dwellings being dealt with as part of the agenda of today's meeting. And I can accept it on the basis the item cannot be delayed into a subsequent meeting as they wish to make a funding decision application. With that, I'll ask if there are any other changes to the order of business. No, and we'll welcome back our Chief Executive, Mr. Beggs, when he arrives. Yes, please. Would somebody, I will move that the confirmation that those two late items be dealt with. Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Lambert, those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving to item 6, the confirmation of minutes, starting on page 22, I think. Sorry, running to 22. Looking for alterations, corrections, pages 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 20, ending 21. Somebody so move, please. Councillor Carter, Councillor Wong, those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving to.
And there's two lots of minutes. So
yep.
The second one is the 22nd of June.
And can somebody move the minutes, the 22nd of June, the taken as read? Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Wong, you're moving. Councillor Carter, seconding. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Moving to item 7, the follow-up actions, items from the previous meetings, and Ms. Gordon, you're going to take us through that.
Thank you. Just those in the room are probably able to answer any questions, so you'll see quite a few have been marked as completed this month, but we're happy to take questions on any of the others if you have any.
Couldn't see any.
I'll just give you a minute more. The only one I have, item 1, the supply more info re council's high street buildings to include the NBS timeframes, safety management. And it just says the development, more information will be provided to this and shared for discussion, but it's labelled as completed. I don't believe until that's actually happened that should be completed. It just should be regarded as in progress. And if we could just amend it to be that. Anything else from councillors? Councillor Duncan.
Just under the same premise then, number 2
yep.
Should be in progress.
Yeah, same basis, I think. It's ongoing. Councillor Lambert has had a question. Or
Just on that Otara Bridge, I was informed by a member of the public that the testing's been completed on the strands, is that right?
well, it is an item in the PMO reports.
Yeah, I just thought I was going to, I would ask it now, wait.
I'll have to look at the detail of it. I'm not certain off the top of my head.
I think he was relying on a visual thing, not.
I don't think it's been.
Yeah, it is a subsequent item, so
Yeah.
we'll come back to that.
That's why.
Anything else, councillors? Will arrange a meeting. I've had a discussion with regard to item 13. This is for the Friends of Taihape, so I will be meeting with Matt with regard to that. Right, would somebody move we receive, please? Thanks to Councillor Pikitiora and Councillor Carter seconding. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. In terms of the Mayor's report, I will absolutely take it as read, and noting there is a table document from Councillor Duncan that I'll ask you to speak to in a minute. I will make a comment under agenda meetings. The Three Waters meeting, Palmerston North. Thankfully, I was invited by the Chief Executive to be part of that group, that meeting, and it was aimed really at staff and Chief Executives. However, the huge advantage was the realisation to me that the governors are behind the eight ball really, and understanding what will be needed and the speed of change. And there are some things that coming out that I wasn't over as well. So I will set up a collective meeting with my fellow mayors to start with, and see where we go to that. Take any questions around any part of my report. Thank you, Councillor Wong.
On the 16th, you attended the Kiwi Rail meeting in Auckland, you see. The only thing that, was anything of interest in that, but I'm curious about any maybe mention of passenger services or something in the future.
Yeah, so yesterday, in terms of passenger transport, I had a meeting, there was an all-day meeting in Wellington yesterday, and that was specifically for passenger transport. And there were, I was going to do quite a report on it for the next council meeting. It was interesting. There were advocate groups wanting, for instance, a night train process that would need to be partially funded by government in terms of transport between Wellington and Auckland. So basically it's an 11-hour trip the way they look at it, and 7 o'clock type regime. So they were there talking about it. They had literally a discussion that actually got a little wee bit testy between Minister Gentry and the spokesperson for National, who is number 3 in the list.
Transport?
Sorry?
Transport.
No, he's not.
Bishop.
Chris
Yeah.
Bishop, thank you very much. Dug me out of a hole, whoever that was. So Chris Bishop and Minister Gentry went toe to toe, really, in front of probably about 100 odd people. And it started quite cordial and then degenerated into, why should we trust you sort of stuff. But in essence, the conference was really about saying we need to get people out of the mode of using cars, and they need to be on rail, and that rail is a far better option in terms of carbon credits, etc. So there was that, but the meeting in Auckland that you specifically asked me about wasn't about transport, it was about central district logistics and railways.
Thought something. Thank you.
So, two-pronged deal there. I'll take any other questions around my reports, etc. By the way, when I was in Auckland, I also took the opportunity to go to Dame Kath Tizard's memorial service, and all of the mayors were invited, and probably I wouldn't have gone if I didn't have another reason to be in Auckland. But fairly low turnout, and surprisingly I didn't see anybody from Auckland Council, and she was Mayor of Auckland for 3 or 4 terms, Governor General, and in the Town Hall with music was fabulous recognition / send-off. Right, before we move acceptance, I'll go to Councillor Duncan. Do you want to take us through your report, please?
Thank you, Worship. Nā koutou katoa. I'm taking this report as read, but it was the take-homes for me, I put at the end of the report. There were a few things that really stood out. I was thinking about it afterwards that tikanga is an interesting concept it was for me, I won't speak for anyone else. And the way I saw it working in our council, that is the clearest way of looking at it, is the way we use standing orders. That's an obvious example of Pākehā tikanga in meetings. So that gives you something to think about when we look at Māori protocols. I just wanted to say that the whakatauki, or the proverbs, were used extensively, which is why I've really made it stand out. Dr. Jim Mather spoke about them as being really fundamental in use, and that with our pepihas, he suggested to me that I should use and memorise a whakatauki, the one about, which is the one I took to the course, sow the seed of unity and we will all blossom together. He particularly liked that and said that I should use that. This just as a matter of interest. He also did say, though, that whakatauki is often specific to iwi, and that you need to be aware that you show respect with that and you don't use fragments, for instance. He said, for instance, the one that's used all the time is what is the most important thing? The people, the people, the people. And people just use that as a fragment, but in actual fact, that's actually can be disrespectful. So it's things like that came out. Basically, manners is what we should be looking at as governors. So we like our own, my husband gets upset when men walk into his house with a hat on. That's an example of just manners that he's used to. Māori, iwi, they all have different iwi and hapu have their own manners, so we need to learn what they are. So it's relationships, and you can only learn so much of this overarching stuff before you actually go to your own people specific to your area and learn and make relationships. And it's the making relationships that is absolutely fundamental to everything, because you can say all the right words, but unless you've got a relationship, you're not going anywhere. So, thank you very much to everyone for allowing me to be in that space. It was a real privilege, and I loved it.
Thank you. I think we should congratulate you for going.
Absolutely.
There were a couple of other things that I did want to say. First of all, I spent a morning on the Omatani water scheme, trying to understand exactly where it is, the scope. I would have paid money to spend that day. You're seeing some magnificent country right up right up into the bushline, a perfectly still day, and it is just stunning. So every so often you have what I call a haphazard beauty, and that was certainly one of those. And I would like to thank councillors and staff that did the bit of a road trip up the Turakina Valley looking at roading issues. I think that was hugely beneficial to us all that are on that trip. Some real lessons to be learned. So thank you for staff in arranging that. I will move that my report be received. Looking for a second to that. Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. And I would like to move recommendation 2 that Councillor Carl can be appointed to the Risk and Assurance Committee. He's already intending to act in that space anyway. But looking for a second. Councillor Piketty, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. And could somebody, Councillor Duncan, are you happy to move your receipt of your report?
Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Dalgety. Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Carried. Moving to the Chief Executive's report, can we just receive it before first? Councillor Duncan moving, Councillor Dalgety, it's a double act here. Seconding, those in favour? Those against? Carried, and I'll pass it through to the Chief Executive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, and I just thank you for your inclusion of your Zone 3 report. I think you actually spoke to a little bit before, didn't you? No?
No, but that's a point.
You're
Yes, yep. Taken
sorry,
as
my
read.
apologies. Sorry, Peter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll start with the dashboard for health and safety, point 2 on my report. Ask if there are any comments or questions to that. I'm grateful that, I see you looking at me, and it's reminded me, Councillor, that every month we have an ELT full day meeting, which is more strategy based. At the start of that meeting, we have the Mayor and Deputy Mayor attend, and we also have Councillor Dalgety in a role as the governance champion for health and safety. And I just want to say on behalf of the staff, we really appreciate your attendance at that. We feel the representation for you of governance into this space is important as we continue to drive our culture in the right direction. So thank you.
Something for you, Mr. Chief. At our last meeting, I was instructed to get something to you in writing, and I haven't done that, so I might just do it verbally now. What came out of the meeting was that just want you to be all aware, probably one of the biggest hazards for staff at the moment, especially in terms of wellbeing, is the amount of workload they've got in front of them and trying to deal with that and prioritise with that. So can we just all be mindful of that when we're asking even more of them? Because it is a significant issue for our organisation. Yeah.
So, extrapolating on that, it's some of the, back to you really, Peter, can you explain some of the thinking behind this and some of the demands or requests you're facing?
We had intended to have this as a discussion in our joint catch-up, Your Worship, which was scheduled for in July as part of our assessment of where we've got to since the start of the training. And if it's okay, I think it would be better to have that in that session. That's okay, Your Worship? Yep. Thank you. If I can move on to point 5, and thank you, Councillor. Point 5 is the community services dashboard.
I've got some questions around point 3, please.
Oh, sorry, please vote.
So just interested, are we doing exit interviews, and what is the process with that? And does any of that, do you expect any of that information to come back to governors?
Yes, we do conduct exit interviews for all staff that leave us. We report on those exit interviews on a 6-monthly basis. We're preparing the latest report now for the January to June period. And the most recent report to Council, I believe, was in January for the July to December period last year.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question, please. I'm just interested. From my perspective, when I look at the team members that have left the organisation, I guess, I'm interested in the turnover, and so how long have they been with the organisation, rather than much else, who they are and what they're doing probably. Is there any way that could be, that sort of information could be reported, or yeah.
I can certainly take that on board and keep it in mind when we do our summary report of exit trends over the past 6 months, for example, average length of service, that kind of thing, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah.
So just add on to what's just been asked, I'm interested to know whether or not we hold a type of register that tells us what our existingly, do we hold something that tells us from year to year what that in and out of staff looks like? Is there an actual document that we currently have?
Sorry, can you say the question?
So from year to year, do we have an existing document that shows you the shift of who we currently have in our staff and whether or not, and what that looks like from one year to the next? I'm just asking if we've got that existingly in place.
Yeah, so we've been reporting, doing exit surveys and reporting on that for 12 months now, so we're just about to prepare our second report. So we have a 6-monthly report and another 6-monthly report to compare it to.
Thank you. And can I just say that I'm interested also in that trend of the retention of staff or not?
Anything further with regard to that item? No? Peter?
Thank you, Worship. If there's nothing in point 4, I'll move to point 5, which is the community services dashboard, and in the same way that we provide a dashboard for health and safety, I've asked Galen's team, given the breadth of what they do, to succinctly represent some of the work they've been doing. This is our first cut, and I thank Galen and her team for that. We had previously put it into a rather large spreadsheet, so this is a bit more governance ready, you might say, in terms of what we've been up to. Any questions to Galen, please?
Thank you, Tua, and then Councillor Lambert.
I just want to mahi to Galen, you and your team for putting this together. I think this is a really good idea, and quite frankly, I'll be stealing this idea. I'm stealing that too, as we're putting back in another space, and I think it's easy to look at, just like the previous report that we get, the other dashboard report we get, and I think it's a little bit, it's one small page, but it actually holds a lot. So I just want to mahi to you for that.
You're welcome to steal it.
Councillor Lambert, then Councillor Taukiri.
Yeah, are we in our happy place with where we are with youth? It seems to be game on and tie happy, and I know it's only a monthly review, and Martin seems to be a little bit slower, but is that just the way it's rolled?
This time around, the Martin staff member was unavailable, so we've just picked things from the Youth Council, but they certainly do have programs as well.
But we'll be getting this monthly, so we'll be able to compare. Yeah, no, okay, good. Right.
Councillor Taukiri.
I'm not familiar with the 2 Manawa funding. Can you just explain what that is, please?
So a lot of that is in relation to sports and that type of thing, and we have support from like Sport Wanganui or Sport Manawatu and supporting with our applications. Previously, for example, the Swim for All funding, that's now done through Te Manawa, and I think that was previously through one of the Sport Wanganui, directly through them.
Second question.
Supplementary, certainly, go ahead.
In terms of the Infometrics information, how often do we get that? How often is that updated?
So we get an update every month, and I apologise because I've just been told that the link didn't work, so I will send out that again to you.
And finally, I understand several of the events have been cancelled for the Welcoming Committee. Is there some background to this?
I think that was part-time and we had a staff member leave and another one start, and just the pick-up of that, I don't feel we promoted it as well as we could have due to that change in staffing.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop. Item 6 are the external submissions. Any questions on that, Carol? I think you could answer, please.
And we also have Georgia online.
Yes.
Just one update, I suppose, if I can, Your Worship, just on the Three Waters submission that we spoke about earlier today. We have got a further recommendation inside the Chief Executive's report asking for delegation for His Worship and the CE to sign that on Council's behalf, given the tight timeframe with that submission, but noting that you will see a copy of the draft and the final as well.
Thank you. Bearing in mind there's quite a lot left in the Chief Executive's report, I see Scott is in the waiting room.
No, that's Frank.
Oh, no, it's not.
No.
Okay. We'll push on
Thank you.
till that happens.
Thank you. There's no more questions on point 6. I'll move to just an update on point 7, which I'll take it as read for St John's and Taihape, which is good news. Point 8 is an update on the Hereford, sorry, was that a point 7 question? On the Hereford Street pedestrian bridge. This is something that we've worked recently with Wakakotahi to try and get funding that was surplus elsewhere, and you'll see there we've been unsuccessful with that. Do you want to add anything, Arno?
No, that's good.
Yeah, look, I'll make comment around this. It's unfortunate because we told the schools that this would be a job done, and that was my understanding of it. Was that you're nodding, so was your understanding as well?
Your Worship, yes.
So somehow we have to go back to the school and apologise to them. But as I read it, it was a council action that we had passed, not just a purely application process. It was an action that we said we'd do.
No, I just take it as an action, Your Worship, on me to write to Whakatige College and Martin Primary to outline some of the things that have occurred, which was the pedestrian crossings and the speed limit, but to acknowledge that wasn't so successful. Is that okay?
Well, certainly there has to be a correspondence with them, how that occurs. I'm not sure that I shouldn't go down and just go to the school myself, to be honest. Councillor Dalgety.
Just from the point of view of clarity, I think that we need to put Ngātawa Road shared pathway, so there's not a mix-up with the pathway that we're proposing on Kaliko Line when we reference this.
Anything further with regard to the Hereford Street or the Ngātawa Walkway? No. Carry on.
Thank you. Otara Bridge update, point 9. I think, Councillor, it was your question earlier, there's an update here. Point 10, Arno, please.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. This one is a catch-up of the current waste transfer station operations contract that we have. We extended the contract a first time, beginning of the financial year, then we extended a second time to get the tender process done. Unfortunately, I was out of action for a couple of months and we have to extend it to the full year. The purchase order that we have currently only covers the extension, the second extension, but not the third. The last 2 months is additional. And
Can we just hold this a second, because were there any follow-ups in the Otara Bridge? I thought there were.
That's good point.
Yeah.
I thought Councillor
Lambert, yes.
was interested in the progress.
Sorry to cut you midstream, though.
was just curious about the actual budget of this project to date. That was my only concern, but I believe Councillor Lambert has got further questions. It's not listed in the project, so do we have an approximate amount of budget that's been spent on this so far?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't know what the exact number is sitting, I don't know, right here. At the moment, I think it would be fairly limited as it's all investigation works, so it wouldn't be large numbers yet. But at some point when the repairs would have to be made, that would be large numbers.
Thank you.
I'll go Councillor Lambert, Councillor Duncan, then myself, Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, so back to my original question, has the work been completed on the stringers or?
Thank you for the question. I just had a look at the update. So they've been removed, but the testing hasn't been completed. So they're off to the lab and they expect that to be completed between July and August.
Yeah, well, I was reading that, I was wondering whether it's true. So yeah, it was purely based on someone asked me because the visual understanding was it had been done, but yeah, no. I can get back to them on that one.
Councillor Duncan.
So last time the update, thank you, was that we were 3 weeks behind. I'm assuming there's no extension of that. But I want to say that I've had feedback from the community to say that they really appreciate the updates. So thank you very much for that. It is working.
Thank you. From me, I share your concern, Councillor Wong. We seem to have gone down a path of saying, this is being done. And I'd need to go back and check as to what council's decisions were. We did make some, I think, but I can't remember. But certainly we haven't had a budget and we haven't had an approval process with Waka Kotahi, and we're going down a tunnel that will get wider in terms of cost. And that's a concern.
At the moment, there is a bridge that's been struck and we are investigating it, and that's entirely in my operational budget. And when we know what the impact and repair, absolutely it comes back to governors because it won't comply with our delegations policies. Like, what we anticipate the repair cost to be could be significant, and so it'll come back to council for decision. So at the moment, it's entirely within my operational budget.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Wong?
I expected it to be so, but I'm just trying to keep on top of it rather than
Your comments.
them getting lost sometime down the track. Because the argument to the public was is this going to be waiting until you guys get funding? And the assurance was we would do everything to facilitate it as quickly as possible. But I just want to make sure that is I can stay on top of information.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the waste one, any idea, I know how this is going to sound like how long is a string, but how long do you think it's likely to take? Because I've got somebody in the waiting room, or do you want me to deal with that?
I think it should be quick. The item 10 is identified. It will require a resolution from council. Recommendation 2.
We'll try and deal with that because I feel embarrassed to interrupt you.
That's
So
fine.
we deal with that and then we will go to the Underville funding request. Carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's going to be a busy day.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's just really for us to catch up on the administration of this to extend that purchase order by an additional $180,000. And that comes from, we looked at the year so far, it's an average of about $85,000 a month for 2 months, and we're $10,000 behind on the budget as it stands. So if you add it together, it's an additional $180,000 to get us to the end of the year and to cover the services supplied to us.
Councillor Maughan.
Okay, I see in 10.3 that it says it will show an overspend of 180,000. Is the total money within the tender that, what we were budgeting to pay them? Or are we paying them more than what was in their contract?
Go ahead. So that's still a tender discussion that I'm having with.
Oh,
that,
no,
it's
nothing to do,
public
this is their
speak.
current contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the money you're wanting us to sign off on today is within our budget and within the financial agreements that we made with Smart Environmental for the year.
I can answer that if it's all right.
I don't want to talk anything about a
No.
future contract.
No, it's not a new
This
contract.
is existing, it's what's
This is
the
existing
existing
contract.
contract, on the
Yeah.
existing conditions of the contract. So this is kind of the problem for us. The numbers that are in the LTP was set in the LTP before all the stuff happened with the inflation that's gone up as much as it has. So what we've done with the contractor, we've agreed on increased rates through council, through resolutions to increase that. What happens every year though, we are behind the allocated budget in the LTP. And that's what you see there. So although the budget allocation in LTP is only $800,000, the cost of delivering services increased beyond that. And this is the way to fix it. Second part of your question is it'll be an overspend because the allocated budget is still at 800. So it is more than what we thought it would be back in 2020.
Councillors, we're in a position here where we actually don't really have an alternative, as I see it. Councillor Cowper.
That was going to be my comment was two kind of questions. One is, do we really have a choice here? And B, what are the implications from a finance perspective of doing this?
This is actually paying for something we've already received. So are you happy to move that? Or while you think of it, Councillor Hira.
Sure, because the question that I was going to have was actually that you have explained it, because that's what I wanted to understand was, and you've said that in the LTP, there's X amount of dollars that we've budgeted, it's gone over. So because I was wondering, well, how can that be? Why is it being like that? But you've explained it, and I'm happy to move that.
You're happy to move?
Councillor.
We're happy to see it.
All right, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any speakers to it? Otherwise, put it to the vote. I'll speak to it actually. I think this is, it's been through assets. It's been around the block a few times. We've ended up in this situation. It's really, we have a contractual obligation to pay this. No right of reply. No, all right. Put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Changing the order of attack for today. We have Scott Parks online on Zoom. We're allowed to let him in.
Yeah, he's in.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Scott. Are you able to turn the video on? Can you?
I think I can. How's that?
By the way, I was super impressed when a lawyer goes and buys a builder's apron the other day.
I never bought it.
All right.
No, can't afford it. Can't afford it. Good afternoon, all. How are we?
We're great. Would you like to take us through your funding request?
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm sitting in a car outside. I'm not in court. I'm in a mediation, hence no tie. And I'm sorry that I'm not there to speak to it personally. So I am chairman of the Hunterville Rugby Club. The Hunterville Rugby Club play and have a building on council grounds there at the Hunterville Domain. We also use facilities and have done up the facilities on the domain in the past for in the grandstand there. And earlier this year, there was there's poles that were put up. I'm not sure when that have lights on them. Earlier this year, one of those poles nearly fell over, and the school kids spent a lot of time going round and round the field there. There's a lime track that the teachers send them around, and it was a health and safety risk. We pulled that pole down, and we've and replaced all the other poles that were there because they were all going to be a health and safety risk. Those poles were replaced, and then we came up with a plan for lights. Now, the plan for the lights has been ongoing for about 20 years. And initially, it was that the reasoning behind the lights not going ahead was that we would have to update the transformer on Parakaratu Street. The council have spent a fair bit of money putting a bore in on at the rugby club, and have found, I think their finding of that bore was that the water was unsuitable for town use. But as part of, if that bore had worked, then there would have been an upgrade of the transformer, which would have allowed us to do to punch into that for our lights. However, with technology and lighting coming the way it is, the demand on the lighting is not what it would have been, and we're able to use the existing arrangements that are currently there. What we then did is, once the poles were replaced, we then went and got quotes for the lighting. The lighting, as you can see from the report, comes to $46,000, I think. And then it was, how do we fund it? And that's when the Parks and Recreation Fund was brought to our attention, and hence my application to you. In the meantime, through confusion between the local Sparky, Steve Monks, his supplier, possibly us, but I don't think so, the supplier has sent up the lights from Christchurch to Palmerston North, and have closed down Steve Monks, the local Sparky's account, because they haven't been paid for. We haven't paid for them because we've got no funding, but we can borrow money. But if we do pay for them, then the likes of the Parks Recreation Fund, the Lotteries Commission, 4 regions, they do not pay retrospectively, and so I have Steve come and see me once every Friday at about 4 o'clock for a beer and a bit of a chat on how his account's getting on. We're applying because we're updating the domain lights so that they can be used for such things as rugby trainings, which happen for maybe 10 weeks of the year, from in between 6:30 and 8 on a Thursday evening. We think that it may allow us to have night games there. We think it'd be very handy for school sports, particularly on weekends coming up, where it's school holidays coming up and there are school sports going on. And for example, the team that my kids are playing against and that I coach are playing against Martin. And I think if we turn around and said to them, hey, do you want to play on a Thursday night so that we're not playing on Saturday? I think Martin would jump at that opportunity and come up and play at 6 o'clock. The school is also very interested in it. The fire brigade, they have a tap. The fire brigade have a tap on the field, and they do a lot of their stuff through it, and a lot of practicing through it. And the local ambulance, which was the local ambulance, quite often meet the rescue helicopter at not quite often. They have used that as a point to meet the rescue helicopter, and they have said to us that if it is lit up, then there is not the need for the night vision goggles, and it works a lot better with the night vision goggles as opposed to having the flares or the lights that the ambulance puts out. And so they are very keen for this to go ahead. And then a further thought that occurred was that this would be very handy in the event of a Cyclone Gabriel type event. It would be a centre of town that has a huge amount of lighting and allows us to provide, allows the community to have a facility for it. Anything else?
Scott, first of all, I'm more than happy to move we receive this report on the basis of it giving us a flare of country life in Hunville. If there's a seconder to that. Councillor Kalkin seconding it. And I think, Scott, you put it very well. I'll ask questions first. Questions from councillors. Councillor Dalgety, are you wishing to, everybody's had the report, are you wishing to move anything?
I'm happy to move recommendation 2. The council does approve funds of the 24,500 remaining in the Park Upgrade Partnership Fund as the final funder to the Hunneville Rugby Football Club to upgrade the lighting at the Hunneville Domain.
Looking for a seconder to that. Boy, you must be popular. There's a number of arms when Councillor Okawa will take you as a seconder. Take a question. It's up for debate.
Yeah, are there any other sports clubs that are looking to apply for that final bit of funding?
No, there is no sports clubs that are actually looking at this particular fund.
Thank you. Question again.
Councillor Moore?
The funding, is this the last tranche of the funding for the year?
Yeah.
You wish to speak to your motion?
As you can see, we've got a very enthusiastic group. Our rugby club is really the hub of the community during the winter, and I can see multiple users going forward with the benefit of some lighting. So, yeah, I thank you, Scott, for your great application and providing we get this across the line. Good luck with the rest of the project.
Thank you very much.
I'll just ask Scott when Hunneville's going to start winning again.
You can ask me that.
Next week.
Can I get a seconder on that question? No, not next week. We don't have to play next week. We're done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. These lights will be just in time for next year.
Which will make them start winning.
Question from me, have you made application to Dudding Trust?
No, we haven't. We have found in the last 5 years that the Dudding Trust are not keen to engage with sports clubs. The Dudding Trust, we have found, and this is on other community boards that I sit on as well, is that the Dudding Trust very much see the sports funding side of thing as not their place, and that there are people in that space, and focus more on cultural matters.
Thank you. We've had one speaker for. Any other speakers? Corin.
I just want to agree with Fee, and thank you, Scott, for that application. It would benefit both clubs, or actually quite a few clubs, but being that Martin will come over there too, and it'll benefit the kids as well,
Yes.
especially on a Thursday, because Saturday is when they're home games, it's packed and the kids get a bit left out. So having their own sort of night time and their time, I think that's great. Thanks.
Councillor Wong.
Could I have a question for you, Scott?
Yes.
First of all, where's your HQ Holden? But more to the point, following from His Worship's question about funding, have you applied to pub charities at all?
No, we haven't. Ultimately, what we've done is we're applying to 4 seasons. Again, we haven't had a lot of joy with pub charities in the past. For example, we've done up the bar and the club rooms, and we're in the process of doing the kitchen and bathroom up. And pub charity, and I don't know why that is, but we just haven't had a lot of joy out of it. But at the moment, our key consideration is to get Steve Monks's account reopened, because we don't think that's is really fair. And we have applied to 4 regions, and our view is that we think that we'll get some funding out of 4 regions. We're prepared to put up some funding, and with the council's Parks and Recreation Fund, we think that should serve us for this project, to allow us to then make an application for other projects going forward.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak against? Right of reply. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Aye. You've got everybody on board, so.
Thank you very much. Is there anything further you need from me?
No, I'm scared we might be on an hourly rate.
Where does that invoice go? Good.
All right, thanks, Scott.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for that. Cheers. Right, bye-bye.
Cheers. Councillors, this was an issue that I put notes against myself, and the Chief Executive has also just given me a note. In terms of ownership, I think that we will need to clarify not only this case, but a whole lot of other cases. So for instance, if I look at the Ministry of Education, where a number of facilities such as gyms, cafeterias, etc., are built on education land, they then become the property of the Education Board, the Ministry. And I think that we're going to have to go through a little bit of a review around how we handle these sorts of things in terms of ownership, because we end up and often with the maintenance of them, but we end up with liability associated with them as well. So I think it is an issue that I'd like to see at this stage flagged as an action to look at. Does that meet your inquiry with me as well? You're mirroring what I'm thinking.
Yes, Your Worship, it is the ownership of the asset and the maintenance of the asset. And in each case, it should be clearly identified as part of the agreement.
Yeah, so in the case of the Martin Development Group, for instance, the playground, once everything was finalised, everything gets signed over, it's council's responsibility. Councillor Duncan.
My question around that is that this has always been the case.
This what?
It's always been the case that community assets such as this end up in council responsibility. I just would like to know what's changed that this has become a problem.
Yeah, I wasn't going to raise it specifically with Scott, but I put notes into my notes around exactly this issue. And do you want a motion or just regard as an action? And I'm not sure if the fine young gentleman behind you.
I'm comfortable as an action, and if I may respond to Councillor Duncan, it's just best practice I'm looking for.
I do have, it's kind of in line with what you're talking about now, but maybe I'll wait until we get to it, and it's to do with the Bulls Rugby Club, with what the thing is, so I'll wait till there, but it's actually in line with what you're talking about right now, and about who owns the asset, given people are on a lease for a specific amount of time.
Councillor Dalgety.
Through Galen, with regards to the swimming pool and this issue, she's given me a very good, succinct description of the relationship, and I would think that would be a good place to start and use that across a lot of the assets.
Thank you. Pass back to you, sir.
Thank you, Worship. I'll come back to my Chief Executive's report, and we're on to point 11, which is our annual plan and our compliance with the Three Waters existing legislation, and this just confirms that we have complied with that. It's popped up here in the just want for your awareness.
Thank you.
Point 12 through to 15 are all property matters, led by Arno but supported by Graham. Do you want Graham to introduce, or do you want to, Arno?
I prefer for Graham to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. May I introduce Mr. Boynton to the table?
Certainly.
Thank you, members. Your Worship.
So we're looking at starting at Bevan Street.
Yes, 12 Bevan Street first.
Items 12 and 13 are really catch-up matters for actions that have not been undertaken in the past. Just, if you like, corrections on land titles, etc. I don't think I need to go any deeper than in the items, but I'm more than happy to take questions.
With regard to Bevan Street, does anybody have any questions there? Would somebody like to then so move?
I will.
Councillor Lambert, you're moving. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter seconding. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, it seems pretty straightforward here. Let's tidy it up.
I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against, carried. That's that one done. Marco Hill. That was easy, wasn't it?
It was, thank you. Can we do it again, please? It's exactly the same situation where a road was formed over private land, which happened 150 years ago. And we are still catching up with a lot of these roads nationally, not just locally, particularly in the rural areas. Again, it's just a corrective issue. Happy to take any definitive questions.
Councillor Hero.
Just a comment, just, with what you've just said about what some people call them as paper roads, and they are all throughout in our rural communities. So I'm just taking on board what you've said there.
Question from me, in terms of the use of that little, because it's literally a little strip of land.
Yes, we triangle, yes.
Yeah. Who would get use of that?
Well, if I
Purchase it.
if I might just refer members to the attachment, the overlay. The piece involved is the Black Hatch Triangle, which is actually formed as road, but still lies within the adjoining owner's title. So we need to legalise that as road, and this will be a liability shift, so that the liability correctly lies with the Road Authority, Rangitikei District Council.
Somebody wanting to move? Councillor Hero moving, Councillor Dougherty seconding. Councillor Hero, do you want to special? To the vote, those in favour?
Right.
Those against? Carried. Next one. This is the Bulls Bowling Club lease.
Bowling Club. May I invite Councillor Hero to raise her point first, Your Worship, rather than just charge in?
Certainly. Councillor.
Michael Laws,
Oh, Rugby Club, I do beg your pardon.
That's the next one.
Bowling Club lease, it's all in the report. If I may just give it to you in a few sentences. Crown land, local land gifted by local business people to the old county, Bulls Town Board in fact, for Bowling Club. The terms of the Reserves Act state that being held on trust actually becomes a reserve for the purposes of the Act. We have to jump through a few extra hoops to work with land dealings in these situations. It requires a formal resolution under the Reserves Act as opposed to under the Local Government Act that Council agrees to the proposed exchange of land.
So this is covered in the catch-all to take all actions required, isn't it?
Correct, sir.
I'm happy to move. Looking for a second. Councillor Carter wishing to second. Any questions? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Rugby Club. Councillor Hero, do you wish to voice?
Well, just a comment around this when I was reading this, and it's about the lease that's in there. It talks about that lease going till for an extra 30 till 2058, if I can bring that back to my memory, but something like that. And so my question is, how I read that was that is the end of that. Am I reading it that that's the end of that relationship? I just want to ask that question with that club.
In terms of the current lease contract, yes, 2058.
So can I just, so then does that mean that in 2058, and I know I'll be well dead by then, but but does that mean that in 2058, theoretically, somebody in some other organisation in that time to come could take that rugby club, those assets over, those buildings over? Is that what that means? I read it.
Possibly, yes. Well, there's two aspects. One is we would anticipate, and any landlord-tenant situation would anticipate that well before expiry of a lease, there would be negotiations to renew the lease one way or another. The other alternative is if nothing happens, then strictly at law, the assets would fall back to the landowner, i.e. the council on behalf of the Crown, which is the same argument that will be discussed in time with regard to lighting at Hunterville. Unless there's a lease to provide for ownership of the assets in the interim, they would belong to the land. Now, the simplicity of these situations is that lease is renewed well before, or sorry, a new lease is negotiated well before expiry.
Councillor Moore,
Um,
and I'll go back to supplementary question.
Yeah, just a question, probably relating to councillor Duncan's questions about lease land and pickings. Do our lease contracts, like if we have a standard lease, any improvements aren't made on that lease property by the leasee, leaseor, you know, that's improvements, and the owner of the land pays for those improvements at the end of the lease, or they get taken away. What is our standard lease agreements with some of these organisations?
In terms of Reserves Act leases, the legislation provides that there is the option for the landowner to buy. In terms of standard, what we call them commercial leases for non-reserve land, that same option is generally provided. The problem being that the underlying rule of law is that anything fixed to land belongs to land, and unless that building fixed to land is leased to another party, it effectively just lives with the land.
Parallels the discussion I raised earlier, doesn't it?
It does.
Councillor Hero, you had an...
Well, just a comment, I don't have a problem with it actually at all. I was just trying to, what I read now, what I feel like I read now, I can't find it. It sounded, to me, it was like, well, there was a finality of it. So maybe I've just read that in the documentation that we were given. And it's not in this one, and I realise that it's in the additional information that came out. That was my, I just wanted to understand that. If there's a finality of a lease, I just want to understand, well, is that what that was actually saying? That when it gets to that time cut-off point, they can't release it, which kind of doesn't make sense to me.
And somebody else could be interested in it, but they'd still have to meet the requirements under the Reserves Act. Councillor Kalka.
If I could maybe provide some comfort to Councillor Hira just around that, so that, as I understand it, the rugby club is coming off a 33-year lease in 2025 and already in renewal conversation. So while the lease is finite, the actual operation of the organisation, in this instance a football club, continues on and are looking to, you know, do other works and renew their lease for another 33 years. So in effect, it's as close to a lifetime lease as what you would get, but you do have to put a finite date on it to then renew it again.
Looking for somebody to put a motion on the table. So
I have a question regarding it. It's got stage 1 in relation to the length of time, but there's 2 stages to be done. Would it not be best to cover the second stage as well?
Probably would, although I don't think, or my understanding from discussions with the architect and the chair of the rugby club is that they're not quite that far ahead yet. It would be very proper that we should probably look at both, at both stages.
So move with the alteration of both stages, stage 1 and 2.
I'm not so sure that procedurally you can do that, because only if there's a public document that has gone out, and somebody could have had an interest in this. So I think that procedurally I can only deal with stage 1 as listed, and maybe I'll take some advice on this with regard to...
You could bring out another motion, just for stage 2. On the floor roof, which I think is what councillor Carr was
Well,
suggesting.
let's test the water. Tell me what stage 2 is and how involved it is before I make a call on it.
Stage 2 is indicated in the attachment as the shaded area to the right or east of the building, which is to be an open space building for community facilities.
Yeah, you're right. I've forgotten I've seen the diagrams there. So on that basis that it is covered and within the report, I'd accept it. Yeah. So are you wishing to amend? Well,
Yes.
nobody's moved yet, so you
Can
can.
not move at the same shot. That's my motion. Stage 1 and stage 2.
We've got a seconder to that. Councillor, how can you second it? Do you wish to speak to it?
The reason for the change of stages being added is it saves them coming back and us having to go through it all again to reinvestigate. As it's the lease of that piece of land that they're looking for. And with having that in mind, it's that they can work forward and carry on with their project.
Are we absolutely satisfied that stage 2 will be as described in the report?
I can't give that assurance at this stage. I haven't seen the concept plans far enough.
That is the drawings that they have, architects' drawings that have been presented to the club to work with at the present.
Presented to or passed by the club?
Passed?
Are being costed.
Been costed, sorry, yeah.
No, if changes that have to come back, I'd accept it on that basis. Any other speakers? You wish to speak to it further? Put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Sorry, just for being a little bit pedantic around this sort of stuff, but history tells me it comes back and bites you sometimes if you don't get it right. The next one in your reports, the council supports the president. I've requested that be removed on 2 counts. One is you're talking about individual people, and that should be in committee. And secondly, that you have one of the applicants who wishes to be able to have the right to present to councillors on Tuesday. Next Tuesday afternoon, the email was sent out. So any councillor wants to turn up and listen to that presentation. It's sad if we made a decision ahead of that. And bearing in mind this is a recommendation to me, and because it's like remits, there might be arguments that are produced at the meeting. So withdraw, that's been withdrawn. And then there's the recommendation that council delegates the authority to approve council's submission on water service to the chief executive and mayor. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Hebra moving.
Carl, I'd like to have a comment about recommendation 7, please.
So just withdraw that moving. Would like to make a comment around.
So thank you for talking about us that going into a councillor only session. But what I'd like to know is that given that there are 3 people standing for the president and also the vice presidency, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that in the fact that we are getting two of those 3 candidates that are coming to have a self, well,
Yeah.
I want to say sell themselves really.
And
Talk about, what does that mean for the other person?
So each person has the right to electioneer in the way they see fit.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 that have made approaches to our council. However, the 3rd person has put his position in writing that was forwarded out to councillors by way of letter, etc. But literally, how they engage with their potential voters is up to them. supplementary.
And does that include the vice presidents? And I'm happy with that. That's good, just so people know that there's clearly we've been out. Is that the same case with the people seeking the vice presidency?
Yeah, what we're seeing is a change in local government. Previously, people standing for the role of presidency haven't really gone out of their way to electioneer in this way. And so literally when we go to the local government conference, they will get a time slot in front of all of the delegates with voting rights. So that's the way that works, very much like a shareholders meeting. Moving to the next recommendation, somebody moving? Councillor Hero moving.
We could have saved that.
Seconding, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any questions, comments? Put it, the vote, those in favour? Those against, carried. Moving to item 10, reports of decision.
With your agreement, I wonder if I could ask you to move to the late item just while Graham's at the table. It would require his expertise potentially.
Yeah. Before I rule on that question.
Just before we move away from the Chief Executive's report, I just have a question for the Chief Executive.
Test the water here.
It's my understanding that the Chief Executive should have provided the Council with a report regarding the High Court appeal process for the Merton Environment Court decision. My reading of the delegations register says that the Chief Executive should provide a report at the next council meeting, and that was May. As yet, we've seen no report apart from a very small item in the projects line.
Did it come as an action out of the previous? What you're saying is, did it come as an action out of the previous council meeting that it should be provided?
No, it's never been presented. In the delegations register, the Chief Executive has the ability to make an application to the High Court and is required to provide a report to Council at the next council meeting. That hasn't happened.
You are correct. It does sit within the delegations resident. If council is put into a position that could result in a court action, for instance, they're required to. Look, I will take this under advisement. I will come back to you later in the meeting as to how I see this from a procedural point of view. Here to accept the late item now.
Is that table?
Yes.
Thank you. This is the Santos Domain site, and I do have somebody jumping out of their skin to move a number of recommendations here. Councillor Carter, are you wishing to so move recommendations 1 through to 4?
Yes. 1 to 4, 1 to 5.
1 to 5. 1 to 5. Does anybody have a view that they wish this to be split? Because if there is a view, I will split it. I'll give you a minute to think of that. Right, I'll accept it if you get a seconder. Councillor Calkin seconding. And questions around this report. Remember, I've already accepted it on the basis of a timeliness of decision making required.
Attachment.
Councillor Carter, do you wish to speak to your motions?
Firstly, I'd like to thank those who produced the report, because it was under a timeline created by the members of the group having to go for fundings. So in that, thank you very much, Peter, for your assistance in that. It's virtually something that they had forgotten about or had it in their mind to think about, not realising that it was quite an illegal event that has to go through to get buildings and that sort of thing set out on the land. And that this just helps them with the process of developing the central domain. And was it Friday, I think, tomorrow, or the 8th, very shortly anyway, tomorrow, to put in their applications for funding. So this actually needs to go through for them in that respect.
Yeah, I've accepted it on that. I'll take any questions. Councillor Maughan, Councillor Hero, Councillor Maughan.
Just on recommendation 3, supporting applications, is that standard practice for council to support applications to not just the Duddings Trust, to other trust applications? Is it our business to be, to basically vouch for a society?
There's nothing to stop us doing that, and I can think of previous occasions where we have worked alongside organisations to provide letters of support. So I don't see a technical reason to say no. Councillor Hero.
Thank you. In regard to recommendation 3, again, I've got no problem with us, the council supporting the application, but I'd just like to know whether or not, and I think about the Bulls Museum, where people have gone and with the thought that they were going to get funding, what happens if that falls over? Because that has happened in the past. Mightn't be exactly in this sort of thing, but where do we sit in it?
Councillor Carter, can you answer that?
They are at the moment, they have a plan for building and everything else. If the funding doesn't go ahead, the building doesn't happen. So it's not, we're not being left in a loop. In regards to the support, they've actually asked the council for their support in regarding as a tick of approval that they're applying through with the council's approval.
Are you happy with the answer? Take any other speakers? Councillor Carter.
I really just want to sort of congratulate the Domain Committee for the work that they've done to get to this stage, for the effort they've put in, and for their project is going to be, if they can get the funding, is going to be a very impressive asset for our community. Just to round out some historical concern that may exist, this isn't a request of council for funding. And I think that is important, and even does touch on the fact that any potential fee waiver request will be considered completely outside of the 5 recommendations that have been moved here. So yeah, very much in favour of this, and it's going to allow for the Domain Committee to move forward.
I'll be the third speaker in favour. Just to clarify, first of all, they have had money that's been associated with the reserve that has built up over time in terms of a grazing lease arrangement. So that's been the base of the original funding. However, they have worked their butts off to make this a reality. They have relocated tanks, cleaned them, planted, controlled weeds, all sorts of things off their own bat, and has spent a considerable amount of time doing it. So they should be, they deserve the accolades. Are there any speakers against? Right. Do you wish to have a right of reply? Vote those in favour. Those against, carried. We're getting good at this today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Executive. Move back to 10.2, the Parks and Open Spaces and Sporting Facilities Strategy Update. Can somebody move we receive the report, please? Councillor Maughan, Councillor Duncan, seconding. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Who's taking us through this? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just go to the last one.
Back to my notes.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is really just the last step to finalise the parks, open spaces, and sporting facility strategy. We brought the strategy to council in a workshop setting with the experts in the room, discussed it in quite a lot of detail, and the last action was for staff and the experts to propose potential weightings for those decision-making criteria. We've done that. We've reviewed it as an ELT. They've created the weightings, and we propose it to councillors today, as we've agreed to do, for you to have a look and see if you agree with it. If everybody is in agreement on those weightings, we will update the document with it, and then we can finalise that strategy and start using it.
I have a couple of questions around this. So, who makes the weighting decision? Will they be made by council? So not the weighting decisions, the decisions against the weighting. So somebody comes in, we've held up effectively the Tai Happy Playground group for a considerable length of time with regard to this. Does this give this council the authority by themselves, on the basis of the weighting mechanism we've been given, to make a decision, or is there another group or another stage involved in this?
Thank you for the question. No, what we do once we've defined how it works, a project will come across council, we'll look at the weightings, multiply it by the score that we give it, it spits out a number, we add the numbers together, and really it's to prioritise which projects gets funding before other projects. So the higher they score, the higher they are on the list for funding.
This is essentially, so if it's a competitive field, and say Tai Happy says we want to do this playground, are they judged by themselves against the strategy with a report presumably from staff around weightings, or do you wait until there's 10 things and you assign them?
Two things.
I want a very clear pathway which we can move forward.
Two things will happen. So we, as an activity, parks and reserves and open spaces, will look at the 10-year plan and at the 30-year horizon, and we will have certain things that we want to spend money on to achieve the goals that we've described in the strategy. Over and above that, there will be community groups that also want to do things, and that will produce a priority list of things that we're going to spend money on over the next 10 years in the 10-year plan, or really over the next 30 years in the 30-year horizon. So that's where that priority list comes in. And what it does, it aligns our decision making with the vision that we've created in the strategy.
So this is what I'm getting at, because the way that I see this playing out is we go back out to the community and says, what are all the things you want to do? And we match it up against the spatial plan and the strategies. And this could take quite some time. It's no longer a case of, for instance, I'm just using that playground as an example, where they come to us and say, we want to do this, and we've asked for a long time. And we then have to say to them, well, we need to go out and consult again with the communities what other options there are and consider them. That's my concern.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's good that we thrash it out. So we've already approved that project and a couple of others. It happens really quickly. Once they've done it, it takes a very short period of time. It doesn't take long at all. The thing that's held it up further was the urban design of the park, and where it should go was really the question that held it back. But it had approval a long time ago.
Do councils see where I'm trying to
Yeah.
Councillor Kalka.
If I could maybe sort of help, what I'm sort of understanding here is that staff will determine the X score out of 5 after applying a weighting, and then it will be brought back to council. Is it a situation where it's a bit like some of the other funds where councillors make a decision based on all of the applications, or is it could you might get one in October and one in February and one in March and one in June? What would be the process?
Yeah, so we have to remember this is a strategy, so it describes direction. It describes where we'd like to end up in 30 years' time. That's what it does. And what this does, it checks if whatever's been proposed fits into that direction. That's really what it does. So what we don't want to do is spend resources and money on things that sits outside of that vision or outside of that direction. So at the moment, that could easily happen because we had lots of requests and we don't really have a framework to decide, is this what we want or is this not what we want? So that's all this does. It says, yes, it fits in. Then it will come to you if they then apply for funding through one of our funds or whatever it might be. But then you have this additional information to say, actually, this one is exactly what we need. And that's really where this is, just to weigh it up against the direction that we've set in the strategy.
Councillor Moore.
No, that explained it. It's not a template to allocate funding. It's a template to allocate priority.
And direction, yeah.
And direction.
Right. Would somebody like to put something on paper essentially here? Councillor Duncan.
I'm happy to move. Have we received it?
As proposed.
Yes.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Moore will take you. You'll speak to it.
We speak to you.
No, I think we've gone over it. Thank you. Sorry, I meant to sleep.
Do you have a question? Just around some of the weightings that have been proposed here, is there any sort of context or anything that sort of stood out where you went, this was 20% for financial affordability, which is double the wider benefit? So how did you sort of come to some of those decisions that was the percentage you were going to give them?
Yeah, that's another good question. So for us, if you look at the two that scores the highest, is we want to create things that can be used by lots of different activities, so it's busy all the time. And we want to be sure that what we are going to build, we can afford for the life of that asset, not just for the cost of building it. And that's why those two are so heavy. And then the others to be sure that it has access to all of the community and a couple of other bigger goals that we're after, but those are really the two biggest ones for us.
Any further? Otherwise, put to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Yes. Would the adoption of the events support scheme does it come with you? Is this in your face or is this Anna or who's this? While you want to come forward, is there anything you wish to tell us or who's leading this?
It's between Gody and
Yeah, no, this is just to finalise the strategy, so open to
They will have read,
comments.
it, but
Yeah.
anything you want to highlight? Okay. Right, would somebody first of all like to receive the report? Councillor Hira, Councillor Dalgety, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Would somebody like to put a second recommendation there? Is that without amendment? Obviously, Councillor Hira, Councillor Lambert seconding. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. That was a quick.
Too easy.
That's right. That was easy, eh? Not always the case. Especially after I've confused the issue. 10.4, the additional matters for deliberation, the annual plan. Would somebody like to move the receipt of the report? This is...
A late item.
This is
We're happy to move, Your Worship.
You've been very quiet.
Particular moments.
Is there an illness or in the household or something? You're wishing to move? Seconded, please. Councillor Carter. Those in favour?
Right.
Carried. Thank you. You wish to take us through this, please?
Yes, we sent this out yesterday. I'm going to pass over to Katrina if you do have any comments, or if you haven't been able to read it, Katrina might just do a very brief update on why this is a late item. Katrina.
Thank you. Good afternoon, elected members. Yes, so this is a late item because as we were preparing the officer responses to submissions, we realised that there were additional matters that were unintentionally omitted from the original deliberations report. So there's 4 topics that relate to the Parks and Reserves area that we've now put the officer commentary against. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. And you've got Mr. Bernardi in the room to answer any technical questions.
Just to make the further point that the submissions were within your packs. It was just the deliberation side of things.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Morn.
On the doggy poo. From the submissions, it sounded like there had been a commitment from council to put some dog bins in Wilson Park at least. Is that not the case? It was just.
I didn't think so. I wasn't aware of that.
Maybe it's just the way she came across.
In the past, I think, there has been, but not currently.
I have received emails about the need for them a couple of times, and it did come up in the annual plan, and it's just one of those things that unfortunately got missed. However, with regard to where they're used, I have a number of thoughts around that as well. You know, for instance, the B and C dams is where most dogs seem to get walked at the moment. In fact, hundreds of them.
I think that was one of the reasons for putting it to the long-term plan, was to have a look at it as a whole district.
And what I'm scared of is we put bags out there and you get bags full of decaying matter that's left near tracks, whereas if it was actually just thrown into the bush, it's just what is naturally happening, to be honest.
With the different parks or the reserves that have been labelled, how many of those are actually sports grounds? Rugby fields and whatnot that are on that list. And is it not an offence to have your dog run loose on those particular areas? And the other question is,
Still poop.
on the submission that she's talking about putting those bins in the different areas.
There are some areas where dogs must be on a leash, including our town centres.
The Dawes Domain, there was no dog on the playing field.
And that's a notified dog exercise area.
No, the rugby field is no dogs. Next door is a dog run area. But with those rugby fields in town, Wilson Park, whatever, are they not a no dog zone?
I can't tell you the answer to that.
And the other question in respect to that is, how many rubbish bins are there in that area, outright as there is now?
There's quite a number.
Why do we need special bins with a dog's head on it?
Yeah, the way that I saw this request was more for places like the dams, etc. But
I think that's one of the, sorry, Bishop, but I think it's one of the reasons we want to do it as part of the long-term plan, is so that we can come back with some information on all those things and look at it across the district.
Yeah. Councillor Hira.
Just a comment, this is the areas that we're looking at here. I would have thought that if we're going to do this, we need to look at this across the whole of the Rangitike, which is going to cost us a heck of a lot of money. And I'd like to say, and I'm in agreement with Councillor Carter, yeah, in many places there are existing rubbish tins. We should be encouraging people to use those for that specific purpose. But if there's some other places that are out there, like the dam, for instance, then maybe we could look at it. No, I do not agree that that any dog waste should be going into any dams.
Unanimous on that, aren't we?
Sorry.
The submitter will receive a copy of the proposed action, knowing that we will be looking
So
at.
pretty much all these, 3 at least will go to the long-term plan. Yeah. And the other one, the Horizons one, has been dealt with. So, okay.
Look, I'm happy to move the recommendation as stated. Is there a seconder to that?
Yeah.
This is about a response back to a submitter. So Councillor Lambert seconding. I don't wish to speak to any other speakers. Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Carried. 10.5 we have done, which now takes us through 11 reports for information. 11.1, Katrina, is this with you? Would somebody like to so move we receive, please? Councillor Duncan moving, Councillor Wong seconding. Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Carried. Thank you, Katrina, all yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll take the report as read. The purpose of this report is an update on the draft community spatial plan consultation. You'll recall we undertook community consultation in March and April this year. We held hearings alongside the annual plan and we received 187 submissions. What's happening at the moment is I am going through a process of officer analysis of those submissions and propose in the report that I bring back to council approach quite similar to your recent annual plan deliberations, where I provide you with officer comments on the submissions for your deliberation and decision. I would point out in the report that I do note that there was a request from Scott's Ferry to go back to that community. And consideration of that would be given as I work through those submissions, noting that if I propose to go back for a meeting, that elected members would be invited to that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councillor Lambert.
Would it be any help? I was just looking, when I was looking at the figures, like, the raw data from each town who submitted, a percentage of the population that submitted? To see who's got buy and who hasn't?
Yep, I'm happy to come back to you with those details, a percentage of the population.
Yeah, per town area.
Yep.
Yeah, no, excellent, thank you.
Councillor Dalgety. Thank you very much. I think that's all we need from you. Moving to the next item, PMO report. Adina is. Yeah. I looked across him. Sorry. Right. You're welcome. Sorry. Looking for you.
So yeah, this month we of course have our normal projects that we can go through line by line. Maybe before we even do that, let's I would actually probably go through the extra bit that you can see in the report that I take as read as sort of a deep dive into our centralisation project with lots of updates on what we're working on at the moment and explaining a bit about the complexity of this project, because there's obviously it's quite a lot of detailed work in that space where you have to make sure that you tell the whole story of the consenting process, and there's obviously a lot of consents that are relating to the project. So the attachment that you can see with this project is our infographic that has been developed by Leah again. Happy to get some feedback on any corrections or anything that you have spotted, but otherwise we're keen to roll out a bit of a communications campaign around what is this project, but also how do we deal with wastewater, how does land irrigation work, all these things they sound quite simple, but actually a lot of people probably don't actually know what that entitles. So happy to take any questions to that topic.
Okay, Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Maughan, Councillor Dalgety.
I've got a few, if that's okay. First of all, I'm just interested, have you had any direct response to the water strategy infotech? The previous one you produced?
No, I haven't had any.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to see those two towns named.
Okay.
I think it would give more clarity that it is Bulls and Martin.
Okay.
I'm even going to be a little bit critical here, sorry. As I love the concept and I want to, it looks, I can't even remember that there's a building at the Martin treatment plant beyond sort of a shed, whereas we look like we're building electricity there. So I have concerns about that. And then I go to the challenges and the risks, and she's taken those out of your report, and I understand that, but I feel the wording is, and I don't really want to wordsmith it, but I have, but it's too waffly. And this is probably our most complex project. Well, it is, isn't it? I don't know. I just we need to develop all potential options. I thought it would be investigate all potential options, and then a land discharge maybe the best.
So part so initially there was I think our comms team tried to put out some options on the Bulls site, for example. The problem is that we cannot jump to the conclusion of what is the option that we're going for. So part of a resource consent and the one that we have to apply for is actually the whole story of you looked at all the options and we are discounting options because of certain reasons. So that's why if I can't take away the solution on this at this point, because if I would do that, then we are sort of preempting our result that is going to be the outcome of the process of coming to this best practical option. So it's a little bit difficult to tell the story of that, because there is it is like a storytelling that you have to submit as part of a resource consent. Like if you just apply and say we're going to do this solution, it's going to be like,
I hear what you're saying, but I felt it was really waffly and not giving a clear enough message of what the options were. I mean,
Councillors, do other councillors have similar concerns? Or are you happy to leave this to a negotiated arrangement between two parties?
Chuck my 10 cents.
It's called covering button being non-committal. If you go committing yourself to a statement and then it doesn't happen, you'll get everyone up in arms. And you said,
I don't want committing to stuff that
I see it as simple as the water.
I just
good water
wonder
for
whether
Martin.
we're tying up
Strategy.
a
Bang.
reasonable amount of council time here associated with what could be conducted between a limited number of people.
Just to point out to all councillors, there is a line that says want to learn more, head to www.rangatiki.govt/wastewater centralisation. If anybody wants to take a deep dive, it's right there.
Yeah.
This is just painting a very brief picture.
I'll take that on board, but it's still a document that I'll go Councillor Wong and then Councillor Loud and Councillor Wong.
This is more of a general question on wastewater, which perhaps His Worship would answer. we're looking at a number of wastewater discharge to land options I've been involved with the discussion. Where are we funding this from? Our long-term debt, or is it, are there other facilities?
Yeah, I think, can I deal with that issue separately so I can just clear away this the issue of representation?
I just have some questions about the deep dive, actually, rather than the representation.
Look, what I'll do is I'll make a ruling here that, with your permission, that there's a engaged conversation, including Councillor Maughan, around the language. And if it gets into dispute, then it'll come back to myself to, is that all right? Yeah. Does that suit you? Sure. So now going back to a deep dive just within the PMO report with regard to this first item, around the centralisation. Are there any other issues, questions you want to raise? I'll go back to you, Councillor Wong, around the funding.
Yes, please.
So your issue was where it is funded from?
Yes.
It's funded out of your decisions around the long-term plan.
Right.
In terms of that's where the council was given direction in terms of this work to be completed.
Right.
How it has been completed has come back to council on a number of occasions in terms of budgetary upgrades, etc. But am I answering your question, or is there something else?
Funding for land for
purchase.
Is do we have any recourse to claim any funds from any environmental or any other agencies? Or is it purely funded out of our budgets?
We have tried. I think maybe I'll let you answer this.
Well, we have received some funding for this project from central government for the pipeline. I don't think we have any funding, we're not successful to get funding for land, but it is currently a part of the budget. Right. It's not on top of the budget, so it's just part of at the moment.
Councillor.
Thank you for this, Adina, and it's still really good to see the Scots Ferry stormwater pump on there again.
Can we just deal with this first PMO one first?
Oh, sorry, that's it above it. Anyway.
Councillor Dalgetty, I think I need to sequence them. Councillor Dalgetty, Councillor Loud and Councillor.
A couple of questions, please. So of the 25 mil, I'm just wondering how much of that budget is currently allocated for a land purchase?
I would have to check that number. There's a number in the budget at the moment, but we have indicated that it's pretty unlikely at the moment that that number would be suitable because we have had land that we have tried to purchase before, and there was a lot more because there was also more land. So that it's not a fairly straight answer, that one, unfortunately. I think the key thing with the land purchase is that once we have available land, it needs to be suitable. And if it is suitable, then we can calculate how much of the land we actually need because it depends on the soil type. And once we have that answer, then we can work out how much land we need to purchase or lease from this available piece of land. And then there's other options, of course. If we have to buy the whole piece of land, it could be leased back to someone else. So fairly complex question until we have land.
But there is a portion of that 25 million is for land. Yes. Thank you.
I'll go Councillor Loud and myself, Councillor Moore and Councillor Loud.
I have several questions, if that's all right. In this report, you've identified multiple risks to this project as it unfolds. Were these risks sort of identified adequately prior to beginning the project?
As far as I'm aware, yes, because this project had a business case done, for example, as well. And for years, I think a number of people have been working on it. The risks have kind of stayed the same and they have proven themselves to be the issues. So, yeah, they have been around for a while.
Has this been sort of brought before the Risk and Insurance Committee at all?
I'm not sure.
To me, there's a lot of risks in there that may not be resolved.
I think the answer to that, Councillor Loudon, is that it has, but I would need to do some checking. There are a number of issues within PMO reports that were discussed that I I need to just put a caveat around my answer there.
One more. The Three Waters funding coming through, I would imagine it's going towards some of this funding for the pipeline. No?
Can you be
Well, the answer is if Three Waters funding comes through, then it is for the delivery of all of those services.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, the waste solution for Martin Bulls becomes out of our jurisdiction, if you like. The presumption is that they would continue with the project. However, myself, Councillor Maughan, my questions around this, you gave us quite an expanded view of the Martin drinking water, and thank you for that, with quite a breakdown within sections of it. This is something that probably we need to look at in terms of being able to answer Councillor Dalgetty's questions. But more specifically, we have an agreement in terms of what's in our funding annual plans with DIA and I'm presuming that we've flagged these risks with DIA because under DIA, if there was a project in the Three Waters, as I understand it, and it's in our annual plan and long-term plans, then they know about that, it's covered. And then they came out and said, if it extends beyond 10 million or a percentage of the budget, you're covered if you otherwise you need to have a conversation with us. Have we had a conversation with DIA about risks associated with it?
Not to my involvement, but I know that we have updated them on that we think that the length of the project will run into the Three Waters transition phase and work will have to be done past the time that it would be handed over.
Okay, I won't go further, but it's probably a discussion that I need to just check around process.
So in my CE's report, I advised that we proposed the work that was in our annual plan had been cleared by DIA.
Yeah, correct.
Yep.
That's stage one.
Yep.
Then we were required under that agreement that if it goes a certain percentage over that, we're required to notify DIA in terms of the expansion of a budget.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting a little bit technical here, and I think maybe we have this conversation offline, I think. So that I can be very clear in my facts rather than portraying something that I could be misled on some way. But we've just flagged that as a conversation to happen. Is that all right? Councillor, I think Councillor Maughan, Councillor Dalgetty, Councillor Maughan.
This is just a question on the work being undertaken at the moment. You can see our 3 crossings haven't been done. Is there any work going on in the pipeline? But
So the work that is going on is the resource consents for the crossings, and then before 2 of them, you have to do the design as well.
Yeah, but no construction's going on at the moment.
But it is not delaying the project as such at all.
Councillor Dalgetty, Councillor Hira, Councillor Dalgetty.
In terms of the iwi, the specific iwi you're dealing with there, I would imagine. Yes. Do you think we should be identifying them specifically in our report? And I'm just interested, so are those meetings happening and are they, engaged in this process?
Yeah, so the iwi we're working with is Martin and Bull, so we have 3 representatives as part of our 2 weekly meetings, and also they were part of the workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago with some of the engineers and experts. So they're very involved in the process. They're quite happy with the progress that we're making and their involvement. In terms of identifying them, I'm happy to do so. I can do that across all projects then maybe, because that would be you know.
I just thought that's a very specific area that it would be easy to nominate them. Yeah. Looking at 5.1.3, when we're talking about this finding the land, I'm still not. How are the locals going to know we're looking?
Can I just step in on this one, if I may, Your Worship? Thank you. I'd like to highlight that this project is very different to even the Martin drinking water project. It was perceived and portrayed, for that matter, that this was moving the treated wastewater that was going into the Tutainui through a pipe and into a Bulls treatment plant, and that's not accurate. What Adina in this report is saying is that we actually don't know the solution. What we need to find is assess all of the different variables, including iwi contribution, to outline the best practicable option. And we may have it in our head that the entire treated wastewater is going to land. That might not be the best practical option. And if it is, then the parcel of land is very big. If it's not, and another option is chosen by the experts and approved by iwi through the resource consent, then it might be a small parcel of land. And so we don't know the characteristics of that until all of the consent process, all of the analysis and all of the engagement has been conducted. And I think what Adina is trying to say in this report is really the notion that this is a very complex but simple project of putting this wastewater that was there now over there over land is too much of a generalisation and not at all accurate for the work that has to be undertaken now. And so it could be very, very different from that.
Just before I go to Councillor Hira and possibly Councillor Wilson, I wonder if the solution here is that this becomes a workshop within assets in terms of how this is, we're starting to get involved in a whole lot of all sorts of mix of discussions, including who's in which groups, etc., etc. Can staff have a think about that while I go to Councillor Hira?
My comment around this kaupapa is just to say thanks that we're moving forward. What I would also say as being in the previous triennium, the main thing that I would like to see in the paper, what you're putting out, is the movement. Because it's fair to say that for us that in the previous triennium, the whole thing around land, which you're asking again, it's been asked again, has none of this kōrero for those that this isn't anything new as far as I'm concerned, and all I'm interested in is where's the movement? Where is the movement from it? Because if we're still sitting in exactly the same place, that's bad in my mind. And so I think it would be useful to see what's the movement, given that this isn't, at the end of the day, this is one of our one of the things that as a council that we're responsible for. It's not like somebody out in the community saying, oh, we want you to do that. It's the kaupapa is there because it's what we've got to do it. So, I mean, I totally get it that it's complex. It's not as easy as what's just been said. And also taking on board with what Councillor Loudon said about all of these different risks that are involved in it. But we've got to you have risks, but at the end of the day, we've got to do something. And what I see in going through a number of these things that have been put forward, we've got to do something. So if it doesn't happen now, having this now been the fourth year that some of us have been around the table, and I just want to acknowledge Councillor, the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor, all I'm interested in, where's the movement and where are we up to next? And for us to think about stop standing and...
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, and thank you, Councillor Hira. I'm just going to point out a couple of things that you had. This is not a new project. I want to thank Adina for bringing it to us at this level, because I think it's a really good refresher, and sometimes it's one of those things where you've got to stop, rethink, refresh, carry on again. This brings it into a level, particularly for newer councillors, where this project's at. The key thing here is the strategies and the priorities haven't changed. Councillor Loudon's comment about risks. At the time that this project was, there was a great deal of risk discussed. Risks will eventuate as you go along through a project. The key is to be aware of them when they arise and take a step to mitigate. You're not going to be sitting at a project of this size and go, I've got every risk covered. The risks will come as you go along. The key is to be able to see them, adapt to them, and to address them within your project. There has been a significant amount of work done on this project. It is nothing new. It is not just being dumped in your lap. We must remember that there was funding enabled and given to us via government funding, which enabled us to get the project started. But the key thing being the risks that we face that are listed in here haven't changed. Our priorities haven't changed. Our objectives and our desires to do what we want to do for the best outcomes haven't changed. And I agree that the Chief Executive is 100% correct around this issue of the land, because we are yet to test some of these things with regards to Horizons and our iwi partners and other partners in this project to see what the best outcome may be. It may be a combination of both. And, it would be foolhardy to buy a huge piece of land and then suddenly discover that it's not suitable for the application that you wanted to do, is because you didn't understand what the application was. So it's a moving beast, but it's nothing new. And I want to absolutely thank Adina for bringing this to us, to refresh us, to get a kind of a deep dive into it. But I suspect,
made that point.
but I do suspect, Your Worship, one moment, please, there will
With regards to the matter that I've been raised by Councillor Loudon with regard to the item of questioning of delegations, the Chief Executive, in the first instance, I'll ask the Chief Executive if he wishes to respond before I give an indication from the Chair as to where I see this position.
Thank you, Worship. So the question was, if I can paraphrase it for Councillor, was that under the delegations register, I am obliged to report at the next available council meeting any proceedings which I take or defend, or council takes or defends in the High Court. Have I understood that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
That is correct for the former delegations register. The current delegations register, which was resolved by council at the end of May, doesn't have that provision. So the question sits more into the fact or the date at which my decision to move it to appeal was taken, which was, I don't know the exact date, but it would have been mid-May. So I was slightly behind in terms of the new delegations register, and one could argue that the former delegations register applied, and I accept that. As I said, it's been superseded and there's no longer a requirement in the current delegations register, so the councillor is referring to the old one. In your order paper, page 94 at the bottom, it does actually mention or advise you that that RDC has submitted an appeal to the High Court, whilst that might fall short of a report that was requested or was in the delegations register, the old and no longer active delegations register. I could certainly, on your instruction, provide a greater report. And finally, Councillor Culkin has also emailed everyone, including me, regarding a report to council on Marshall Rail Hub. And my response to that was, I'm very happy to answer questions. And if you were to request a more detailed report, I'll be happy, following the Mayor's or the Chair's decision, to provide that report to you. But over to you. I'll just ask Carol if I've missed anything first.
No, I think that's the correct sequence. It's the new delegations policy. While we're trying to, the intention of that was to make it more workable, streamline everything. That section was not included, and it's not included in the Local Government Act as a requirement. It was just something previously that the old council years and years ago put into that delegations.
Thank you. Is that all from the two then? In terms of the delegations register is quite specific with regard to matters to the High Court. Whereas probably I was thinking in terms of the Environment Court as an ongoing action associated with that process. And that's question one in my mind. The second one is probably more about intent here. So there has been a report that partially in today's agenda. I coincidentally replied to Councillor Culkin as well, saying more than happy for a report to come to council. There'll be, Councillor Loudon, you'd be conflicted with some of that, of course. I also made note in one of my mayoral reports to say that that there are a couple of minor matters still to be raised, whereas I didn't specifically say that it was the High Court, nor is it my responsibility. But there have been 2 or 3 occasions where this matter, to my satisfaction, has been raised as a matter of interest. I certainly take on board in terms of ruling that there needs to be a slightly more detailed report around 2 councillors which would be in committee or excluded, where councillor you would be conflicted in that approach. I do wish that you had brought this matter to my attention ahead of time, which gives me the opportunity to be able to actually check the delegations and match that against what has actually happened and what has not happened. So my expectation is, as previously the Chief Executive and I have both said independently, we didn't have a conversation, that this would be a matter of advisement to Council around the details with regard to the High Court. Does that satisfy your position?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that we all are in a governance role here, and I feel as though it's important that the CE should have reported to the councillors on the action, and that was the High Court appeal went in on May 18th, and so that was well before the May meeting, and that was his requirement. And so as councillors, I think it's important that the councillors understand the lay of the land and not be put in a difficult position.
I think that this is not a matter for opinion or questioning.
I'll write one. I'll write an email to you because there is an opinion and it'll be coming.
I think it's been raised in a very legal context, and there's probably some degree of advisement around this. So I will leave it there. I take on board your comments, and I guess if I haven't addressed your process correctly, I apologise. I will need to do some checking, but other than that, it's a process of complaint to me as chair.
Can I just say one more thing? I come at this not from my perspective as being a member of IRMA on the other side of the fence, in conflict.
A point of clarification, I don't think we need any more discussion on this, Your Worship. The chair cannot sit there, the councillor cannot sit there and say that he doesn't come as a perspective of IRMA when he chairs it. Sorry, no more.
Can you stop there, please? I've made a point that this discussion shouldn't occur further in this setting.
It's not the forum.
I'll double check the action, Your Worship. So does council agree that I'm to bring a paper to the July council meeting regarding the project and the High Court action?
With regard to the lodgement of the High Court.
Would that satisfy you, Your Worship?
It would absolutely satisfy me.
And I just wonder if that would satisfy the councillor?
Councillor, I have to make up his mind at that stage, or are you happy that that happens and that's and then you're fine? Okay, can you just record those, please? Right, back to really good stuff. Second item, PMO.
Yes, going through the projects now with Lake Waipu. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions, comments. And then moving on. Pardon?
Requirement for more land on that one.
There's a separate paper and public excluded on that one. Moving on
So
to.
Lake Waipu, everybody's happy, move on. Yep. Tai Happy wastewater. Papakai?
No read there.
Nothing there. Councillor Wong.
Mrs. Foley, could I ask through the chair? Just, I drove down there the other day and there's nothing being done, is what you said in your report. You said you have updated locals with the, someone computer crashed. And
Road closures?
no, just to update the locals with local news. What's the one in?
Community engagement to
Yeah,
continue.
community engagement. Could I ask you what community engagement you have done and please?
So we're trying to update obviously our website and on Facebook, any comms around that project.
Right.
And given that there's not much activity, that wouldn't be so much happening now, but I think we made a comment around that on our website so that people don't expect activity.
Oh, right, that's
So
the key.
I'll double check that we have done that.
That's fine, as long as I know that, I will,
Yeah.
I can refuse that and host it if I need. Thank you.
Taipi Amenities Building Block. A question from me, opening date?
Yes, I have put a tentative date in for the 21st, I think. The reason being that we had these issues having moisture in the timber wall that we had on our construction site, which delayed the stairs going in. And those stairs now have been put in, and we are on plan B basically for resolving the whole fire issues that are part of this. So I'm a lot more confident that we are on track for that date now.
I guess my question is, again, is there any way that the building could be used prior to code of compliance?
There will be. So code of compliance is, obviously all the paperwork needs to be completed. So we will, as soon as possible, issue a CPU. We had our final inspection from our inspectors already last week, I think it was. And there are a few things that he pointed out that need to be just checked and slightly changed maybe. But we're fully on track on getting a CPU so that we can use it as soon as possible. And then the CCC will come after.
The certificate of public use.
Yes. Sorry, CPU is the certificate of public use, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan.
I just had a bit of feedback from the community and requesting that I go and view the building. Everyone says it's looking like a lovely gem in the middle of a rather rugged space. And I just wonder if that's going to delay things, because it sounds like it's not really getting to the building is going to be a problem, from what I hear.
You mean the muddy area around?
Yes, around the.
So the area around the building will be reinstated and grass seeded, which we did this in a similar area, and it only took a few days for grass to actually come through. We obviously will try to keep people on footpaths so that the grass can actually have a chance to grow. And there's quite a few access ways to the building, so there will be quite easy access from Tanner's, from the car park, from the road down there. So I think the area that is the most muddy at the moment, we can hopefully just give a maybe a week or two rest, and then it will be okay. So, yeah.
Martin Civic Building. No. Taipi Town Hall and Library Development.
All green.
Other and community-led developments. The Industrial Park and Rail Hub decision there. And I was going to note the reports there. Other things. Pump station somebody brought up. Yeah, you're fine now. Sit right up. Thank you.
I'm started working again.
That's it. Thank you very much. We've moved and received that, haven't we? No, we do need to. Somebody, Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Hira, seconding, those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Carried. 11.3, the update council's response to the flooding event. Somebody like to receive the report? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Lambert. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. We welcome the. Oh no.
It's just moved from one spot to another. You can just having moved.
I might start that, Your Worship, if I may, while Anna's just getting ready. So this was an information paper for council to be aware of how staff react and have reacted in the event of the flooding in our district in May. I was questioning Arno on how we reacted, both from a regulatory perspective and a functional perspective. And even I was really pleased and surprised at the level of work that staff did to go and analyse what was happening to inform us and inform you for future decision making. And I was so impressed with what I was hearing. I asked Arno to prepare a paper so that you understand what we do in these kind of times that help inform good decision making by yourselves in the future. Arno.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity. So this is something that we'll keep doing from now onwards every time we have a rain event. And as you progress through the years, you collect more and more information to a point where you can quite accurately determine what might happen before an event occurs, and that's really where we're heading. Included in all that work then is also a way that we start understanding how our networks react and what they do in a much better way, and we start making much better decisions. So as you'll see, as I described through the paper, we start off by looking what's happened across the district. We then determine if there are any hotspots. Obviously, that's where we have to focus, where there's hotspots and things that happen a lot. We overlay over that, and we have that work being done now, what the intensities and the return period of the event is. So in the future, if we see a bulletin from Met Service or NIWA saying, we expect this to be a certain rain event, we can immediately go, well, we expect X, Y, and Z to happen. And then suddenly we go, if you think of our emergency response, we go from being concerned about the whole district to being concerned about certain areas, to finally being concerned about certain houses, to finally be concerned about 3 or 4 houses where a floor level is actually at risk. And we know where to take sandbags, or we know where to spend focus and attention because we figured it out before it happened. And that's the process that we're on. So this is the first one, and we'll keep doing it as we move along, and we'll get better and better and better at it.
Questions? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Lambert, myself, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, very, very good report, and fully understand what you're doing, and your explanation is really good. Is there a step further back from that that we can perhaps identify where the rain event is happening further up the field? Because we know that if it happens in different areas, it's going to have a slightly different effect. Have we got some mechanism to identify that to give us a heads up, an early start?
The first thing we've identified now as a gap is we don't have enough data collection over the district. It's very sparse. It's actually quite cheap to install those. So working with the new 10-year plan coming up, we want to improve on that and have more measuring gauges and things that can connect to SCADA and let us know where it's happening.
Thank you.
Councillor Lambert, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Lauder.
Dave pretty much said what I was going to say. I think this is brilliant, and then to build on it's really important because there's one thing I notice up our valley, we've got detention dams up, and you'll get a rainfall event and you'll see a dam full that you didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
You know, even though you've had, like, you're just across the valley, but that's had twice as much rain as you have had. It's amazing. So it'll be a hugely valuable tool going forward. I can't support it enough.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Great report. 2.4, you said if any capital investment could improve the situation. So this will help assess if any capital investment could improve the situation. I'm just hoping that that can be the case, because those submissions were really interesting to me on the annual plan, with the number of people that talked about Martin being in a flood zone. So this is really great. I would like to say that I'd love to have a legend on your maps. I find it really hard. I just look on these pretty blue lines and stuff.
Councillor Lauder.
Just this map attachment 1, have you got an expanded, or was that just what you called?
Really good question.
Whole town?
If you look on our website on the GIS tool that's there, is the entire district is mapped. I just use that as a snapshot of the specific problem that came up as an example, but it's for all properties across the district. Yeah. And we've been able now with pictures and videos to calibrate that. So we pick up, for instance, a fence pole that we could level and check against the levels that we have there to see if that's accurate, and it's very accurate. It's actually really good. I'd like to have it in a finer resolution to give us more information, but again, it's part of this process of getting better at the data.
Myself then, Councillor Hero. I wouldn't lose I'd take the opportunity, and it may well be worth an ad in the local papers. There are people within our district that have incredible rainfall collections and electronically that not only detail how much, but when and where. And rather than putting a whole lot of stations around the district or around Martin, I suspect that if you put an ad in the paper saying we're wanting to understand this more, does anybody have very good, accurate information? The PR aspect of that would be very high as well. Councillor Hira, Councillor Lambert, Councillor Hira.
Just to support everyone else's kōrero around the report. I'm just interested to know that anytime, as you've said to us, you can step back or step forward once we get the more data that we get. Once you're able to get down to those 3 or 4 homes, is the intent that they would be, that information is given to them and we're working with those people? Is that the intent?
Yes, definitely. That'll be the intent, is to share the information with them and see what mitigating actions they could possibly take to make things better. Yeah.
Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, I agree with your point, Your Worship. It's some people do have incredible rainfall records. I'm happy to provide the rainfall record for our valley for the last 30 years.
I didn't realise you were quite that old, but it's Councillor Wilson.
Just with regards to the officer's report and mentioning of the GIS data, how accurate and when was that last updated on the council websites with regards to floodplains in the town? Because that's the GIS data that you're referring to.
Yeah, that's correct. From the information that I have, I think this is about the 2015 floods. It was after that this was created and put on.
I guess I'm just urging that it's accurate as possible and as up to date as possible, and just suggesting that we check the information that's on our website. That's all.
And that information comes out of Horizon's LiDAR mapping, doesn't it?
It does. I just want to remind councillors also that we've got the Martin flooding investigation project coming up out of the Better Off funding in the next financial year. And potentially that could include a bit of that to be sure that these things are actually accurate and recorded well. Thank you.
Katrina's got a whole lot of this information.
She said she can help answer the question. She's still online if you would like her to.
Well, my question doesn't require any further clarification, just as long as it's being checked for accuracy.
Yeah.
Right, look, I think we've all acknowledged very well the fineness of the report. Thank you for that. 11.4 Mangaweka Bridge update. Presumably it's through there. Who's going to take us through this? Okay.
I was going to say that I'm happy to move.
You're happy to move? Certainly, thank you. Second it. Councillor Wong. Second, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against, carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's one is for me as well. It's just an update of where we are in that process of transferring the responsibilities of operating that bridge and looking after the maintenance to the Heritage Society in Mangaweka. There were a couple of things that we have to, or that we agreed to do before we do the transfer, and that is to get consultants to draw up a maintenance plan for the next, I think it's for the next 30 years. It was quite long and it's quite detailed. It has estimated costs and all kinds of detail with it. That's been completed. The next step would be to finalize the agreement with them to take over the management and the maintenance of the bridge. So it's just an update of where we are.
Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Kennedy. I didn't quite understand your the reference in the report about having to stop the bridge partially so that vehicles couldn't use it, but walkers and bikers. Is that still just in the pipeline, or is that something we intend to do? And do we do that before we hand it over or not?
It's a really good question. We got a couple of options with this. The bridge is still a road legally, and because it's still a road, vehicles have access to it. And to get around the legalities of that, we've had advice that it will be easier to restrict certain kinds of vehicles instead of trying to stop the road completely. It'll be much quicker. But we have to do that first before we would allow only pedestrians and cyclists and so on to use it. It needs to be done first.
So supplementary?
Supplementary, I'll take.
So that's our intention, that we will be doing that process before the next part. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Still got a fair way to go in this meeting, so I'll push on. 11.5. Can we scroll back? Could the report, the recruitment of Chief Executive just be received, please? That's all. Thank you, Councillor Hero, Councillor Lambert. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried.
Okay, smooth. Yeah.
Minutes for committees. Would somebody like to
Move as a block.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson seconded. Councillor Calkin, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Um, 13.1, the revocation of speed limit bylaw. Scroll back. Who's taking us through that?
I can. So this is a recommendation from the Policy Planning Committee, who considered the request that there's no longer a need for a speed limit bylaw because central government are doing their own thing. So it's really just tidying up the process from policy planning through to council to formally revoke that speed limit bylaw.
Happy to move, Your Worship.
Yeah, happy to second.
Put it to vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Would somebody like to move that we move into public excluded? Thank you. Stop recording. We've got, do you want some names?
Yeah.
Councillor Moore and Councillor Wong.